Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and you were watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about Imperial Guard regiments as we get into the Jopall Indentured Squadrons. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day, and if you have any suggestions for lore videos, just comment down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Jopall Indentured Squadrons. The Jopall Indentured Squadrons are an Imperial Guard regiment that hails from the once peaceful agri-world of Jopall. On their homeworld, the Jopall owe their government money as soon as they are born, taking up valuable resources throughout their childhood. They incur a debt that they cannot repay until adolescence. Most citizens of Jopall spend the majority of their adult lives working off the debt they incurred during the first part of their lives. There are many ways around this punishing system. The citizens can either borrow money from their local lords, or they can work off the debt to the government by joining the Jopall Indentured Squadrons. This system explains why the Jopall are never short of recruits. The Jopall Indentured Squadrons are equally well known for their marksmanship as they are for their greed. The question of compensation is often raised by the officers of the Indentured Squadrons, and every enemy life they take is tallied somewhere around the soldier's person, to be raised at a later date. Excellent snipers. During the Third Imperial Campaign to defend the hive world of Armageddon from invaders, the Jopall were stationed in the upper reaches of Hive Tartarus. The excellent marksmanship skills of the Jopall Indentured Squadrons were able to substantially thin out the number of the secondary Orc troops laying siege to the outer reaches of the Hive City. This regiment favored a defensive stance where resources were committed only at the last moment. This made them extremely unpopular with fanatically committed regiments such as the Death Corps of Krieg, specifically around the perimeters of the Hive City. Despite their opposing doctrines, these two styles of warfare complemented rather than detracted from each other, despite the resentment that rapidly grew between the two Imperial Guard factions. The Death Corps of Krieg were disgusted by the very idea that a soldier fought to work off a debt, rather than serving out of a sense of pure duty to the Emperor. They found the relaxed attitude toward command hierarchy in the Indentured Squadron to be appalling and inefficient. It is just this fact, though, that makes the Jopall so unique. Individuality is a trait that is openly encouraged within the Indentured Squadrons, and the ingenuity and commitment of a soldier is rewarded with a small financial compensation. Noted for their unethical tactics, the Jopall familiarized themselves with Hive Tartarus to an exceptional degree, assimilating many of their soldiers into the Hive militia and utilizing the resources of the Hive against the Orc invaders. As a result of this, squads of Jopall soldiers poisoned the Orcs' water supplies with toxic wastes. Snipers harried the Orc lines around the clock from the Hive spires surrounding Tartarus, and the tunnels on the outskirts of Tartarus were collapsed, instantly forming an intricate network of trenches, from which the Death Corps of Krieg were reported to have used. This spontaneous and uncoordinated activity was looked upon with contempt by many of the more traditional officers, but the result was undeniably valuable to the war effort. One instance in particular highlights both the potential of the infamous Jopall cunning and also the tremendous strain that it can put on Imperial resources. A small squad of low-ranking Jopall officers managed to isolate a tribe of Orcs who had somehow obtained several Imperial vehicles. These troop transports were painted with crossed axes and hung with skulls, but unlike the rusting, smoking heaps that the Orcs normally employ, these were well maintained and comparatively clean, hinting at a presence of somewhat technologically oriented Orc leaders. Masquerading as liaisons from Van Strap's personal guard, the Jopall officers negotiated the unauthorized transfer of 3 Imperial basilisks and a substantial amount of artillery shells with a high-ranking Orc mechanic. The Mac, as he called himself, was allegedly frothing at the mouth with excitement, and after thoroughly checking the ballistics, it paid the Jopall cadre substantially for the artillery pieces. However, the basilisk's undercarriages were each strung with a thin line of plastic explosives covered in dust and grime. As soon as the cadre of Jopall officers were safely in the spires of Tartarus, observing the mechs proudly parading their new bolstered artillery battalions to their green-skinned warlord, Morbad, via a satellite camera, the remote devices each officer carried detonated the plastic explosives. This triggered an explosion just destructive enough to detonate the ballistics ammunition, causing a chain reaction that consumed a full 6 of the Orcs' artillery. Despite the success, Armageddon High Command deemed the voluntary loss of 3 Imperial basilisks as unforgivable, and the officers were summarily stripped of their rank. However, the soldiers in question now number amongst the most popular of their entire company. And those were 40 facts on the Jopall Indentured Squadrons. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. The reason I wanted to create a video for an Imperial Guard regiment is because I wanted to talk more about creating lore for an Imperial Guard army, specifically Imperial Guard units. A couple days back, I talked about how if you pump a bunch of lore into your HQ, that's going to trickle down. So if you're creating an army, or if you already have an army, give your HQ characters a reason or an objective to fight. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific fight in that battle that you're about to have with your friend, but just an overall fight. So for example, I think I said if there's an HQ that wants to liberate a planet, then all of a sudden every single battle that you go into, regardless of what type of game it's going to be, it's for the purpose of liberating that captain's homeworld or that captain's charge, whatever it may be. You can do the same for Imperial Guard units. So you don't necessarily just have to have one Imperial Guard unit type in your entire army. So if you started out like everybody else does with the Cadian Guard, you could throw in Death Corps of Krieg. It doesn't mean you have to start a whole new army of just Death Corps of Krieg, because in reality, in the lore, you have different units fighting, or sorry, different regiments fighting within one war. So as you're creating your army, if you want to throw in some mixed match units, they can have the same stat line, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a named Imperial Guard regiment. So it doesn't have to be the Volstrayan Firstborn or the Cadian Guard. It could just be something you completely make up, like the Jopall Indentured Squadrons, they don't have a stat line, but if you want to kit bash a unit, that gives you the freedom to kit bash every single unit within your army, making them all kind of flow together, but at the end, they are all different regiments or coming from different regiments. And what that does is it allows you to pump in lore specifically for that unit. So just like you did with the HQ, you would pump lore into the leader of this specific unit, and then all of a sudden the entire unit has a purpose. An excellent example of this is the Indentured Squadron. They're fighting for themselves. So on the battlefield, you might be fighting orcs, and if you have an Imperial Guard unit and you've pumped the lore of them fighting not really for the Imperium, but they're fighting for themselves, all of a sudden they just have each action that you tell them to do is not just an action to win you the game, but it's an action that, what would they do? Would they charge into the orc horde, or would they try to pull back and try to destroy the mech guns that are doing damage, and hopefully not hurt themselves as much? And that lore that you filled into your unit all of a sudden translates onto the battlefield, and it's something that I learned through D&D that I'm trying to implement within 40K. So think about that when you're building your Imperial Guard regiments, or if you already have an Imperial Guard regiment, if you have a unit that you painted and you really like how they look compared to your old stuff, maybe make them special by giving them fluff separate from the entire regiment. Give them a goal, and then move forward from that. But again, I hope you guys are enjoying the videos, and I hope you're using them to build your own lore. If you want to give us your fan-made lore for us to put out there, just hit us up either on Facebook or email us at onemindsyndicate1@gmail.com. Give us the lore of your specific army, and we'll create a video for you guys. If you enjoy what we do and you want to support us, jump on over to Patreon. A simple $1 a month helps us create more videos for you guys. If you can't support us on Patreon, we understand. Simply by liking, commenting, and sharing, it helps out the channel, especially commenting. So even if you don't have a full 4 pages of lore for your army, if you have a cool unit or a cool idea for the lore to a unit, comment down below. Let us read it. And it's just a way for you to create lore and put it out there for your own models that you're working so hard to create. But thanks for everything, guys, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.
Oh, if you took my freedom.